Most of us would have heard of Ripley's Believe It or Not. If you haven't, it's a radio program which presents strange and bizarre events or facts about our world. I brought a little taste from their website in case you haven't had the pleasure. It goes like this. The Marina Grape Festival in Italy is famous for having a fountain of free-flowing wine in the town square. But we wouldn't be writing about it if something didn't go wrong. The engineers messed up and accidentally sent the chilled, sparkling wine through the domestic water pipes. Residents noticed the error when the smell of wine tainted their bath and laundry water. A few residents were quick thinking enough to fill jugs with the free treat. Believe it or not. Our passage this morning, Genesis 21, is a real Ripley's Believe It or Not moment. I mean, what a fantastic passage. A woman of 90 gives birth to a son, fathered by her 100-year-old husband. Believe it or not. What God has done here is something simply astounding. Even today, there is nothing that can replicate this. No idea would have ever repelled Abraham and Sarah. It is a mighty demonstration of God's authority over His creation. Yet there is actually something even more significant and astounding happening in this chapter. Something far more significant than a simple and mere display of power, as powerful as that power is. Let's take a look at verses 1 to 7. The Lord visited Sarah as He had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as He had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. He said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. It says, the Lord visited Sarah as He had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as He had promised. To find out why the Lord is visiting Sarah and what the Lord promised, we need to go back to chapter 18. So let's do that. If you have your Bible with me, please turn with me. We're going to read from verse 9. Abraham is at this point entertaining the Lord as he passes by the oaks of Mamre. From verse 9. They said to him, where is Sarah your wife? And he said, she is in the tent. And the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. The way of women had ceased to be with Sarah. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, after I am worn out, and my Lord is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you. I'll go back to verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you, about this time next year, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He said, no, but you did laugh. Well, there is our explanation. The Lord will return to Sarah, and Sarah will be with child. That is the Lord's visit and His promise. The first verse of our passage is telling us straight away that God is doing what He said He would do. God is being faithful. And that sets the tone for the rest of our passage. From verse 1 to 7 is filled with reminders of God's earlier promises and their present fulfillment. Verse 2 reminds us that this has happened when God said it would happen. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God has spoken to him. Verse 3 goes out of its way to mention that Sarah was the one who bore the child, not any other woman. Abraham called the name of his son, who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. In verse 5, we're shown a contrast to what happened in chapter 18. Verses 5 to 7 we're shown a contrast. In 18, Sarah scoffed in her heart that God would give Abraham a child by her. Yet here we are carefully reminded that Abraham was indeed 100 years old. And again we are shown the joy which Sarah knew from this blessing. And what a joy it must have been. At last she had her promised son. Sarah says in verse 6, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. Such a transformation. God has turned the laughter of disbelief to laughter of joy. So great that others will join in laughing with them. In His faithfulness, God has brought great joy after much trial. Of course, Sarah wasn't the only one to laugh at the promise of God. Abraham did the same thing in chapter 17, verse 17. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? It was actually at this time that God told Abraham that his son would be named Isaac, a name means laughter. Just another reminder that God did keep His promise.